Max Verstappen has set down a marker following yesterday's Miami Grand Prix. And to be honest with you, I don't think he's going to be caught at this stage. That was psychologically a huge, huge win for Max Verstappen. Apart from that, though, a very quick recap on what happened. So, Miami Grand Prix yesterday, it was Verstappen that won a strategic battle against his Red Bull teammate Sergio Perez, overtaking him on the 48th lap. Out of 57, I should add. Verstappen started in ninth on the grid and employed a contra-strategy with hard tyres, whilst Perez, his teammate, began on pole position with medium tyres. Verstappen's rapid overtaking manoeuvres, including, I would argue, one of the overtakes of the season, where he overtook two cars and a series of fastest laps, brought him closer to the front of the field. Perez struggled with his medium tyres in the hot Miami conditions, and by lap 32, Verstappen had increased his gap over Perez to about 15 seconds. This was after Perez had pitted, of course. After changing his tyre compound, Verstappen came back out on the medium tyres and was eventually able to pass Perez, although I have to say the move looked like it was completely inevitable. He crossed the line to finish about 5.3 seconds ahead of Perez. Then, best of the rest, Fernando Alonso completed the podium in third place, with George Russell finishing in fourth place after passing both of the Ferraris. Carlos Sainz then took fifth place, whilst Lewis Hamilton managed to secure sixth place after starting in 13th. Leclerc finished in seventh, followed by the Alpines of Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, with Magnussen completing the top 10. So there you have it. Well, what was there to talk about from that? Well, let me touch on a few of the key topics as I see them at the moment. Verstappen, as we've said, he's won the Miami Grand Prix. Yes, he has indeed. He's unstoppable. As I've just summarized, he started in ninth place. And this weekend was very, very important, of course. We're just out of Baku last weekend. Perez was very impressive. He had a very good win. It's one of his circuits that he seems to like. But he really needed to back it up this weekend. Psychologically, if you're going to beat somebody like Max Verstappen, this has to be the time to shine. This has to be the time where he had to beat him. He had to set down a marker here. He wasn't looking good, I have to say, during all the practice sessions and even early on in qualifying. I figured this wasn't going to go Perez's way, but somehow we had that amazing last moment crash from Sergio, not from Sergio Perez, no. Perez on the brain. Of course, it was from Leclerc, and Max Verstappen wasn't able to set a time due to a mistake earlier in Q3. So as a result, that put Verstappen back in ninth place, and you're thinking to yourself, this is just what Perez needed. This can be where he sets down a marker and he goes on to win two races in a row, and psychologically then, that's the point where potentially it eats away at Verstappen a little bit, and you almost have a Hamilton versus Rosberg 2016 situation happening there. I'm sure it wouldn't be very pleasant in the Red Bull garage, but that's the nature of the beast, as they say. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. In fact, the complete opposite, the reverse of that happened. What we actually got in the end was Verstappen starting in ninth, whilst his teammate in the same car, the equally fast Red Bull, started in first place, and Verstappen still won the race. Not only does that say to Verstappen, I can do this with my eyes closed, maybe not your eyes closed, but with one hand tied behind his back, maybe. But it also says to Perez, you're not going to beat this guy. You have no hope. Not even with a head start like that, you can't beat him. And I know there will be certain circuits where Perez will be good, like in Baku, but I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing him being able to put it up to Max Verstappen in this championship battle. And even if they were to replace him with Daniel Ricciardo, Perez, that is, and we don't really want that. Like, I'd love to see Ricciardo back in Formula One, but we don't want Perez out of Formula One. I don't think Ricciardo would be able to do any better than Perez, to be perfectly honest with you. We haven't seen any good form from Ricciardo for a number of years now that would suggest that he would be able to do anything. So the challenge has to come from the other cars. And Ferrari and Mercedes, whilst Mercedes are taking steps in the right direction, they're so far off the pace that they've actually allowed Aston Martin to jump them. And it comes to our second question here. Is the championship over? Unfortunately, I think the championship is over. I really do think the championship is over. Red Bull are going to walk away with the constructors, and Verstappen, unless something really unfortunate or dramatic or something like that happens later in the season, he's definitely going to win it. And he could wrap it up quite early. I think it's ominous that Red Bull have won all the races this season as well, so it's not looking good for anybody. What about best of the rest? Well, does it matter? Does it matter? Okay, I guess all constructors standing positions do matter, but it's kind of disheartening. We have had 5 races so far this season, and Fernando Alonso has finished third in 4 of them. So he's very clearly the best of the rest as it stands at the moment. Disappointed, I would say, in his teammate. He can't get there, but Alonso is a very special talent. We know that, and despite his age, he's still able to put in the performances. What would peak Alonso have done in that car? That's a big question. But Aston Martin have been impressive and look like they are potentially the best of the rest as it stands now. And then we have massive disappointments, I would say, from teams like McLaren, very off the pace. AlphaTauri, clearly it's not a priority for them anymore, and Red Bull are going to dispose of that second team at some stage. There have been rumors about that, so I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Um, and then, Ferrari like started out the best team last year, eventually became the second best team last year. They're just very inconsistent. You have to wonder about their engine. Strategy wise, they have been much better this year. I think the team have worked a little bit on that, but it doesn't matter. They're only fighting for fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th. And at some stages, actually during the Miami Grand Prix, I think Haas actually looked better than them. So best of the rest. Yeah, it's a great battle in the midfield, but best of the rest is midfield, and then there is one team way out in front. So it's not going to make for very exciting racing later in the season. But eventually, you would have to imagine there will be one race where maybe both Red Bulls don't finish for whatever reason, and that's the big opportunity for somebody like Alonso to get a win. But what are the chances both Red Bulls won't finish? What are the chances both Red Bulls between them will win every single race this season? That sounds awful, but it could happen. The way they are at the moment, they're so fast. They're so fast. Anyway, let's move away from the doom and gloom. Championship standings. Well, championship standings. Let me bring you over here. We can do a quick screen share. Before that, actually, let's have a look at the results from yesterday. So as we can see, it was Max Verstappen who finished actually in first place. It was Perez who started in first and finished in second, as you can see, 5.3 seconds behind his teammate. Then Alonso was some way back, 20 seconds behind Perez. Russell finished in fourth place. Then Carlos Sainz finished in fifth. Sainz, of course, had a penalty for speeding in the pit lane. You don't see that very often anymore. Lewis Hamilton finished in sixth place despite being on the radio early on complaining that the car wasn't working, I've got damage. It was a very bad look actually for Lewis Hamilton. I think the way he complained on the radio yesterday, and in the end he managed to get sixth place after starting from 13th, I might add. So he was very good, but he shouldn't be complaining like that. It just drives me crazy. Leclerc 7th, Gasly 8th, Ocon in 9th, and it was Magnussen then in 10th place, getting a point for Haas, so that's good. Also, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that Gasly beat his teammate for once. Gasly is new to the team. Ocon has all the experience with the team, but it was important that Gasly starts to compete with his teammate and actually beat him on this occasion. And Gasly has been pretty good, or had been pretty good all weekend, I have to say. Yuki Tsunoda then, he's doing great for AlphaTauri considering how off the pace they are this season. He finished in 11th. We have Lance Stroll very disappointing down in 12th. I don't know what to say about that. Bottas 13th, Albon 14th, Hulkenberg 15th. It was Guan Yu Zhou in 16th, Lando Norris 17th, De Vries in 18th, Piastri 19th, and Sargent comes in last place and 20th. So what does this mean for the championship standings? Well, let's have a very quick look at that indeed. If I can remember how to do this. Oh yes, We just need to we need to click on the standings. Of course, we need to click on the standings. I've got it here now. I've got it here now. Surprise, surprise. It's Max Verstappen who's leading the championship now. He has a 14-point lead over Perez. So it's not over yet, but it just, as I said, it doesn't look good. Psychologically, it's done. Psychologically, it's done. But, you know, Perez just has to hang in there and hope that Verstappen has a few technical issues or something like that, and he can remain in contention. And you'd never know, as far as the season goes, if you're still in contention towards the end of it, anything could happen. But I just fail to see it. I really do. I fail to see it. I just think Verstappen is a much better driver than Perez, and that's where the difficulty arises. Then it's Alonso who's standing in third place in the championship on 75 points, so he is not really in contention, as you can see. Lewis Hamilton, very impressive, is in fourth place. Sainz is in fifth. Russell is in sixth. Leclerc is in seventh. Very disappointing for Leclerc there. Stroll is in eighth. I would also argue that's very disappointing relative to his teammate. And Norris somehow is in ninth place in the championship. So quite a good showing for him, despite the challenges that McLaren are having. And Gasly then in 10th place. And despite saying that he was being beaten by his teammate in the majority of the races, you know, they didn't score points in the majority of races, so it didn't really matter. But so he's actually ahead of Ocon in the championship, believe it or not. Then Hülkenberg is in 11th, and that puts him ahead of Magnussen, who's way down in 17th, as we can see. Esteban Ocon then 12th, Piastri 13th, Bottas 14th, Zhou 15th, Tsunoda 16th, Magnussen, as I said, is in 17th, Albon 18th, Sargent 19th, and De Vries in 20th. So Sargent and De Vries looking for points. What do I make of De Vries? I'm disappointed a little bit with De Vries, I would say. He looked good last year on his cameo in Formula 1, so I had higher expectations. Also, the fact he's a former Formula E world champion, not easy cars to drive by any means. A lot of stress in driving one of those cars. You know, there's so many systems and things they need to be aware of, and battery degradation and everything else like that, and coasting and lifting. You know, it's a lot of work, those races, and I felt it should translate across to Formula 1 with the tires and everything else, but no, not so much. Not so much. Teams Championship, there won't be any surprise here. We're going to have Red Bull leading the way on 224 points. Aston Martin in second on 102, so it's more than double score. And quite close to them is Mercedes on 96 points. Ferrari, has them in fourth place with a long way back to McLaren in fifth place. Look at that, 78 points versus 14 points. But this is where it gets really tight, because Alpine are also on 14 points, Haas are on 8 points, Alfa Romeo are on 6 points. Then further back we have AlphaTauri and Williams. Driver reprimands. I don't know what this is. Oscar Piastri has a reprimand. I'm not sure what that is for, but I might look into that later on. And finally, the penalty points. At the moment, it's Gasly who sits on top of that. Next points dropped for him will come later this month. He's going to have 2 points dropped. So that's something, I suppose. And then Daniel Ricciardo, I don't think he needs to worry about that too much as it stands at the moment. And then nothing else too substantial. I suppose Alonso there on 6 penalty points, but nothing too much to worry about there either. So yeah, nothing dramatic in terms of the penalty points, apart from Gasly, who's in a little bit of danger, but he will have 2 points taken off very, very soon. I think, so I think that's about it as it stands at the moment. Miami Grand Prix, bit of a boring race if you ask me. It wasn't the best one I've ever seen. And who was my driver of the day? Well, my driver of the day was Max Verstappen. He put in a very good drive. If I'm to call a second place driver of the day, it's going to be Lewis Hamilton. A third place will be George Russell. I think both of the Mercedes drivers did very well as well. But you have to give it to Max Verstappen. Started in ninth, won the race. was quite dominant in winning the race as well. And that overtake on Gasly and Leclerc, two cars, wow, what an overtake. If you haven't seen that, it's definitely on YouTube. Look for it there. It'll be in the Formula One highlights package as well. It was amazing. Finally, just wanted to remind you, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Like this video as well, and hit the bell if you want to be notified of future videos. And thank you very much for joining us as ever. Really appreciate your support. Really thrilled to see that we've gone over 13,000 subscribers as well. That's fantastic. And I will speak to you very, very soon.